Off. Welcome everyone to this meeting of the IJB's Risk Audit and Performance Committee on the 10th of September 2024. Welcome everyone. I'm going to hand over now to the clerk, Ms. Robertson, for the housekeeping.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning. The meeting is being recorded and published online after the meeting. Could all attendees leave their camera on but switch off their microphone when not speaking, but switch on both camera and microphone when you are invited to speak so that this is picked up on the recording. If you wish to speak, please use the raise your hand function or indicate in the meeting chat and I will alert the Chair. I will now do a roll call and would ask that members confirm their attendance when their name is called so that this is clear in the recording and can also be recorded in the minute. Councillor Gregg, Chair.
Present.
Councillor Cook.
Good morning. Here.
Thank you. Hussein Patwa.
Present. Good morning.
Thank you. And we have apologies from Fraser Bell, Kenny Lowe, Michael Oliphant and Shona Oman-Smith. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Item 1.1, are there any declarations of interest or transparency statements from members? No. Okay. 2.1, there is no exempt business. 3.1, the minute of the previous meeting. Are we content that this is an accurate record of the business transacted at that meeting? Or any problems? Nope, we approve the minute. Great, thank you very much. 3.2 is the business planner. Are there any questions on the business planner? Fiona.
Thank you, Chair. It was just to check, we would like to defer line 10 to the next meeting, which is on the 3rd of December. So it's review of financial governance. That's just due to staff absence. We've been unable to get the report this time, so we'd like to defer if that was okay. All other reports are on the agenda as expected. Thanks.
Okay. There are no questions, and if we're content with that proposal, everybody's okay with that. Good. We can move on. That's approved. We go on to the quarterly financial monitoring report, which I think Ms. Mitchell-Hill is leading on. Are there any questions on this report? John.
Yeah, it was just to get some reassurance on the record. I think it's on page 14. We talk about one of the measures we're using to manage expenditure is a recruitment freeze, and I know the answer to this because the guys do well. Just want to get reassurance that we are taking into account staff well-being, because I think the guys and girls are working really hard. So just want some reassurance on that in terms of having a recruitment freeze.
Yep. Who could help with that? Ms. Mitchell-Hill.
Yeah, happy to come in. Just to give that, so we do have a vacancy control process in place, John, so it's quite a robust process, and Fraser and I ultimately have the final sign-off of that. We're absolutely, so there is a lot of scrutiny around it, but absolutely taking into consideration, service delivery performance and our well-being of our staff. Sandy, my colleague, observes our absence management very closely. He maybe wants to come in. Actually, I see his hand's just popped up, but we are considering all of the unintended consequences of vacancy management, or unintended. Well, it is unintended, I suppose, but yeah, we are definitely considering that. But I'll let Sandy come in. Thanks.
Okay, Sandy.
Thank you, Chair. A couple of things. I think one, to highlight that the committee that we continue to have a very proactive series of wellbeing opportunities, some of which are free, some of which we fund, and we promote and market them, so to speak, very actively. So they continue. I think the other thing to say in sickness absence terms, we used to typically get our sickness absence stats quarterly in arrears. But with help from NHSG colleagues, I recently got sight of the July figure. So the last quarter, I think it was kind of April to June, was 6.1%. The July figure had came down to 5.8%. So I can't document that because somebody showed it to me on their screen, sort of thing, in terms of, but to give soft assurance, that figure has came down, and as well as the fact that we have a very proactive, ongoing series of wellbeing opportunities that we're trying to promote to staff.
Grand. Thanks for that. Could I ask about 3.5 and 3.6, where there's mention there of impending cost pressures on the IGB. Much of this is unknown. So there's not much that we can do about it, but there are clearly risks worth noting from the higher level, from the higher level pay deal that's been spoken about across Scotland, not budgeted and fully funded. These the risks, the impacts, I would imagine will be reflected through our financial monitoring. Is that the case? There's also in the previous section there's mention of community health and mental health funding, which could be at risk from the additional cost pressures. So just to know, the clarity on how we track these financial issues. Who could help with that? Fiona.
Thanks, Chair. So absolutely, it'll be through our monitoring arrangements, but there is definitely significant risks we do have. As we said in the paper, we're still awaiting 1.3 million for our community services. If we don't get that, that is going to increase our overspend.
Yeah.
We have a letter from the Scottish Government that's reduced our funding for mental health learning disability services, including school nursing. That's over £100,000 worth of shortfall. Now, we got an email at the end of last week saying that they were going back to review that letters that had come out, but that letters have come out to every partnership across and every health board across the country. So not very clear yet at the minute of that, whether that means they're going to review that and give us the money back or not, considering all the messages that have been coming out recently. So I completely agree, and I think it's right that we do acknowledge the significant risks to this, but we will be very closely monitoring this, as you say, and Q2 is due at the end of this month, and I think we'll have a better understanding of where we are, but definitely the risks there if we don't get that additional money coming in, that we'll see an overspend increase that we haven't got the resource to cover at the minute. Thank you.
Okay, yeah, thanks for that. It's a really tough economic environment out there, very considerable pressures on the public sector everywhere, and we all share responsibility for managing the resources, the dwindling resources that are available. So monitoring, I think, will be really important. The finance monitoring and the ability to support and develop the resources that we have. So it's good to know, reassuring to know that we will have that information coming through in due course. Thanks for that. Hussein?
Thank you very much, Chair, and good morning once again. Can I just pick up on Sandy's point regarding the absence rate and fully taking cognizance of John's point around well-being? Just for context, I think it might be helpful to know where do we stand in that regard as compared to other boards in Scotland, or is that rate which Sandy alluded to, is that fairly standard across the piece, or are there places which are greater or lesser?
Okay.
Or is that fairly standard where we are, and it's not something that we should be overly concerned about? It would be helpful, Chair, I think, including for those maybe watching, just to have some context.
Yeah, I think that comparative perspective could be really useful. Sandy, can you assist with this query?
Yeah, Chair, thank you. I can partly answer Hussein's question. We don't see, I don't routinely see other boards' data, but the best comparison that we sort of use is comparing our figures, Aberdeen Partnership, with NHS Grampian figures. I think that's a reasonable comparison because the machinery for producing the numbers is the same, so it's a consistent basis from one year to the next. So the July figure, for example, Grampian was somewhere around 5.4% sickness absence. We were around about 5.8, as I said earlier. So at times we are doing a bit better than the Grampian average, and at times we're below. And it'd be fair to say we're a nudge below the Grampian average at the moment. I think that's a reasonable comparison because most of our staff are employed by NHS Grampian. So that excludes the council component. And I couldn't produce this on a piece of paper right now, but my understanding is that our council staff in the partnership in the council, their sickness absence is better than the council average. So we also need to keep in mind the council staff component of things. Thank you.
Thanks for that. I mean, Fiona, did you want to come in on this?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I've just been at the Chief Exec meeting this morning, Hussein, and we've actually been discussing this from an NHS Grampian point of view. And we are actually below the NHS Scotland average. NHS Grampian is, which obviously includes a lot of our staff. And we are one of the lowest boards of sickness absence in the country. We're definitely in the very much of the bottom. So that's good. So I like to think that actually that's commendable to our staff because I think they are supporting our staff well. So it was quite reassuring to see that. And Sandy, just to confirm, you're absolutely correct. Our sickness absence on the local authority side of our staff is absolutely reducing, and we are below the average for ACC. Thanks.
Okay, thanks very much. I mean, later on in the agenda we have the Accounts Commission high level comparison on performance, which is quite abstract, but I think it is a useful direction to get that overall picture, to get an understanding of where we are in comparison to others. But I mean, I appreciate that analysing the financial positions of different IGBs would be a huge undertaking. But yeah, any insights we can get on that are really helpful. Do we have any other questions on the financial monitoring? Okay, Fiona.
Yes, I just want to come back and mindful this is my first RAPC, so apologies if I'm oversharing here. But I do just, I know you spoke about the risks earlier, Chair. I guess I did just want to make sure that we are, as a senior leadership team, we are obviously scrutinising this regularly, but with all the impacts of the financial position that we're in, there is a potential this could impact on our performance and our delivery of our third year of our delivery plan. So, it's something that we're looking at very closely as a senior team. But I guess I just want to flag it here. There is definitely risks to Aberdeen City Health and Social Care Partnership about our delivery when we're trying to work with the financial budgets that we have. Thanks.
Okay. Yeah, thanks for that. There is mention of mitigating actions within the report to accommodate the budget pressures. That's just to be realistic, to be expected. But we've all got the confidence in the leadership team that they will manage the situation of dwindling resource very effectively. So we're all reassured. Are there any further questions on this item? Quarterly financial monitoring report. Are we content to agree the recommendations which are on page 13? We all happy with that? Grand. Okay, that's agreed. In which case we can move on to 5.1, which is the internal audit report from Jamie Dale. Jamie, any comments to introduce the report?
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, committee. This is our standard report. You see it every session, provides the committee with updates on the delivery of the audit plan, as well as the follow-up of audit recommendations. With regards to the actual contents of the report, you'll see from the progress section that continue to close off the reviews. The final review of the previous year has been completed. It'll be at committee at the next sitting. It has to be presented to the Council Audit Committee first because it is a health and social care partnership service which they deliver. And we're already underway with delivery of the current year. IJB budget settings with management for finalisation, and counter fraud is underway with field work. With regards to the actual follow-up of recommendations, as at the end of June, there were 2 outstanding, and management provided an update on these. Happy to take any questions, Chair.
Thank you very much, Jamie. Are there any questions for internal audit? I think it's very straightforward. Any questions? Nope. Then can we agree the recommendations and also thank Jamie and his team for the work? Many thanks. It's absolutely comprehensive and really helpful to see that. Thank you. Thanks, Jamie. So those recommendations are agreed. We can move on to 6.1, which is the Q1 delivery plan update. Callum is here. Would you like to introduce the report, Callum?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you very much, and good morning, everyone. So the committee have the Q1 delivery plan update report in front of them. The purpose is to provide assurance related to the progress of our delivery plan, and it's recommended that the committee note the information provided within. So again, this is a kind of relatively standard format that the committee has been receiving on a quarterly basis for some time now. As this report covers the information for Q1 of the year 3 delivery plan, then there are obviously a few changes compared to the previous report that the committee received, which was the final quarter of the year 2 delivery plan. So whilst the actual structure of the report remains the same, there is some additional information provided, particularly in the cover report, to provide a little bit of comparison as to how the composition of our delivery plan has changed over time, whether that is the actual programs of activity or the number of projects themselves. There is one table in particular, which I think it might be helpful to draw the committee's attention to and provide a little bit of additional context around. And that is specifically on page 33 of the pack, where we provide a comparison of the delivery plan projects from year 2 and to year 3. And this is with specific reference to the tiered approach that Aberdeen City Council have adopted and that we have recently adopted as well. So if you look at it just purely on a numerical level, then it does appear that there is a significant change within the number of activities that we are undertaking within the prevention tier. But as I mentioned, I think it's maybe important to provide some additional context just to make sure that we're interpreting this information fully and correctly. So I think probably the first thing to say is that most of the work that we do actually spans across all of these tiers. So a lot of the work we do has elements of prevention, it has elements of early intervention rather, and elements of response in it as well. And so, you know, the undertaking of this and deciding what work fits into what tier is a somewhat subjective undertaking. And this is particularly true for the period of time when we undertook this activity within year 2. So we undertook this at a time when we hadn't developed as much guidance around this approach and how to essentially judge this. Whereas looking at year 3, our thinking is much more developed around this. So, you know, I think that's a really, really important point to note. The second one as well is that not all of our projects are the same in terms of their size and scale. You'll be aware going through some of the deliverables that some projects are maybe within their exploratory stages, they're small tests of change. There are other projects which are operating at scale across the city and have been doing so for some period of time. And so because of this, sometimes looking at individual numbers by themselves isn't necessarily the most helpful or the most appropriate. Instead, what I would argue is probably a more helpful barometer to look at within this context is actually the prevention program itself and the number of activities that sit within that. The committee will note that from the year 2 to the year 3 delivery plan, the number of activities within the prevention program has increased from 7 to 12. And I think this is probably a more appropriate representation of the types of activities that we're undertaking within this space. And I think this is actually really helpful to show our commitment to prevention. Obviously, at a time we've already spoken about on this call, having to make some very, very difficult decisions aligned to the financial climate. But hopefully, this provides a point of assurance to the committee specifically on this part. Other than that, nothing else in particular I'd like to draw the committee's attention to, but I'm sure between myself or other colleagues on the call would happily answer any questions if there's anything specific in addition to what I've described. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Callum. I think the tiered approach is really useful. It helps to structure things operationally and strategically. So is it not the case that you would be aiming to promote and support tier 1 prevention? Would the goal not be to try and ensure that as much effort and emphasis is being put on that on tier 1? Would that be fair to say, or is that slightly imbalanced?
I think that would be fair to say. I'm looking at Alison and Fiona, wondering if it might be more helpful for them to come and provide some additional context on that.
I mean, just to fill in on the query, it's just that I mean, you mentioned that it's not about numbers, but numerically, we're looking at from 23-24 to 24-25, quite a significant decrease in the numbers of tier 1 interventions. And a rise in 2 and 3, which kind of suggests that that's not really the direction we want to go in, or am I just reading these figures absolutely incorrectly? It's just to get a sense of whether we are developing projects which are really focusing effectively on preventative solutions. Alison.
Thanks.
Yeah.
I was just about to ask if I could come in. Yeah, I think I agree completely with Callum. I think we don't really want to get too tied up with the numbers, because we changed our approach completely. I mean, the first stab that we had at whether projects were in what tier, we weren't using a definition at that point. It was a bit of a finger in the air. So I think our numbers from our year 1 delivery plan are not a true reflection, and therefore any comparison is really not terribly valid. As Callum says, we have moved from 7 projects in the prevention programme to 12. So, we are increasing in that area. And I think when we come to do our next delivery plan, it might be a better comparison. But absolutely, the direction of travel that we are intending to go in, it is more towards the prevention and early intervention aspects. Although, again, I would add that caveat that Fiona mentioned earlier. With our budget restrictions, it's very difficult, or it is going to be very challenging, to maintain that focus.
Yeah, thank you very much. And then Fiona.
Thank you. And just to build on what Alison was saying, I think, the future, I mean, we're reviewing our strategic plan at the minute. Our strategic plans, the spine of it's going to be about prevention and how do we get that I think it's very difficult when we've still got the business to deliver, that we have to deliver and continue to try and transform that services as well. And I think there's a lot for me about public perception and expectations and how we manage some of that going forward, because we do need to shift. We need to shift where we are and to absolutely start to focus on prevention, or else, this is going to be a legacy that we're never going to get out of if we don't start to do some of that. However, it's going to take a bit of time. So I think, yeah, I'm with Alison. Don't get too hung up on the data, because I think we absolutely are looking at prevention, but we still have services to deliver, which does sometimes hamper us a little bit of where we'd love to be. If we could just stop and get off the wheel, we would absolutely shift everybody to one direction, but unfortunately we've still got high demand within our services. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you. And Sandy?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I'm just going to kind of to try and give some assurance that kind of the strategic intent towards prevention doesn't necessarily mean relate to just projects that we fund, or indeed we put any money into at all. So I'm going to give my friend and colleague Shona isn't here today, but I mean, I would draw attention to 3 things we've done with strategic intention that we have significantly promoted and supported just in the last kind of calendar year. So in January, and it's happening again, there's a big Aberdeen Health and Wellbeing Festival in the Beach Ballroom. There's 1,000+ people there. We can take no credit, but we took a lot of promotion and had a lot of stalls there. In May, we can't take credit, or sure I could take credit for, we had Grampian's first Wellbeing Festival. So we attached ourselves to what Shire and Murray had been doing. And from memory, I think we had 210 or 200 something, just over 200 Aberdeen events in that programme. And then my third example would be, I hope to see there everybody at the Grampian Gathering in October, where again that's significantly shifting. It's a different aspect of well-being and prevention. It's kind of towards later in life. But those 3 things are not projects, I guess, is my point. And the strategic intention is we are very much significantly supporting them and providing a lot of the leadership around their expansion.
Great. Thanks very much for that information. Yeah, I mean, prevention and early intervention is the direction that we're traveling in with the delivery plan, and with as many projects as possible. So, I mean, I was just reading on the surface the figures. So that's been reassuring, really reassuring to know that behind the figures there's a great deal of transformative work going on to make that shift towards prevention and early intervention. So that's really helpful, because we want to encourage and support, and just on the face of it, it wasn't really saying that to me, but you've provided all of the comfort that's required. So many thanks for that. John.
Thanks. Yeah, and I might be at risk of getting hung up by statistics again on this one. There's on page 39 of the pack, we have a table that shows we've got 13 projects, which is 16% of the total, at risk of non-delivery or not meeting deadline. Just want to get some reassurance. Would it be fair to say it's because we set stretch targets? And if you set stretch targets rather than easy peasy targets, there's always a risk that you might miss them. So I just wondered if we get some commentary on that.
Okay, who's going to volunteer? Alison, thank you for volunteering.
Thanks, Martin. Yeah, you're absolutely right in terms of setting ourselves some really ambitious targets. I think the main area where we've perhaps not managed to hit the deadlines that we set is in the area of rehabilitation. The review we agreed to do a strategic review of our rehabilitation services, along with a specific review of our neuro rehab services. And I don't know how, looking back, I don't know how we ever expected us to do both of those things within the timescales that we set. So I would cite that as a specific example of where, yes, we're not meeting. We're very strict with ourselves when we're marking our homework, if you like. You know, if we say we'll do something by September and we haven't done it by September, that's when it goes into that risk category, and rehab absolutely falls into that. There are other areas where we've maybe hit some bumps along the road and that weren't expected, in terms of maybe getting information governance approval to do some stuff, and things that just have basically taken us longer than we anticipated. So although it sounds like a lot, 13 projects, you know, there's a rationale, and the Excel spreadsheet, you know, that shows those ambers. You've got all your explanations there as to why they're behind schedule or whatever.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks for that, Alison. And I know you guys do be very strict on yourselves when you're marking your own homework, so I am reassured. And the other point to comment is that when we come to delayed discharge, we are one of the top performers across Scotland, which is reassuring.
Yep. Grand. Could I just ask about that delivery plan status table? So the column with program and total number of projects is, so for example, commissioning is the first one. So there are 5 projects there, and all are at green. So and that's the case with all of the projects within each of those groups are classified as green, or there are 2 ambers. Is that right?
So I can answer that. So
Yeah.
The color assigned to the program itself, it provides an indicative overall status of how the program is functioning. The columns to the right of that basically provide the composition of that, if you like. So if you take commissioning for an example, there are 5 projects which exist within that. So 60% translates to 3% of the projects that are on track. We have 40% or 2 projects which are complete. And so therefore we use essentially the majority of the work that exists within a particular status. That is how we calculate the overall status of the program. Does that make so if we
yeah
yeah
that's really helpful, thank you, because there are 82 projects, and so there are 13 that are at amber and all the others are at green, or there's one not started and one closed. And so I think that's very impressive, and it's you know, I think that's something worth highlighting, that we do have really, you know, really positive achievement going on. So I just think that's something to celebrate, that we have such excellent positive achievements underway through the vast majority of the projects. We've got the two ambers. So we heard about the review of rehab, and I mean there's that major one at the end of work, which is workforce, which is a very considerable category, but nevertheless the indicators of the delivery plan are very significantly going in the right direction. So really good to see. Thanks very much. Any other questions on this Q1 delivery plan update? Are we content with the recommendations? Yes. Okay. Then we can go on to 6.2, which is the Navigator project evaluation. Next, 6.2.
Morning, Chair.
Thank you. So who's leading on this one? Is it Simon? Are you there?
Yeah, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Can hear you, yes.
Yep, that's fine. So this report sort of summarises a sort of 18-month project, which was to establish peer navigators within the emergency department of ARI. There was a number of challenges in getting the project established, and the organisation that was delivering it, based remotely, had some challenges in terms of recruitment, retention of staff within the period of test of change. The data that has been provided, whilst useful, doesn't really demonstrate a significant impact of the service, and there wasn't enough data produced from the project to demonstrate the outcomes that we set out to try and achieve in the first instance. So really the project's there for information. The report's there for information and any questions that people might have. We are undertaking quite a lot of work around the pathways into and out of acute care, and we'll be looking to develop that in partnership with ARI staff and management, as well as community-based services as well. So happy to take any questions.
Okay, thank you very much. I think it's useful to have that evidence that's been gathered through the Navigator project. Maybe not surprising to see the statistics on reasons for challenging behaviour experienced by the professionals. I wanted to ask, yeah. So I mean, yeah, happy to note the work that's been done, and to maybe set aside this project, but there's clearly ongoing issues which Medics Against Violence deal with, everyday issues which medical professionals deal with. Yeah, I'm getting feedback. Where's the feedback coming from? Thanks. Yeah. So I think this project and the Medics Against Violence work has raised a very important issue, which is the safety of frontline medical professionals. And I wanted to ask, on that theme, if thought has been given to providing body-worn cameras. That's apparently been raised in the past as a protective solution. Just thought that was worth asking since we're on the theme.
So this project was Medics Against Violence is a charity that was set up in Glasgow. It was medics, particularly MaxFax sort of consultants and emergency department consultants who were concerned about the level of knife crime in the community, who attended emergency department for support and treatment, and they set about trying to engage with people to look at the determinants of knife crime as a sort of, I guess, a public health approach. So it wasn't specifically about reducing violence against medics, as it were. It was the medics against violence and trying to look at the root causes of that in the community by helping people look at the complex social circumstances that people involved in that might be experiencing. So this project was a development. Navigators were people who try to look at people who end up in the emergency department because of complex social needs and help them reconnect in the community. And I guess it's not so much around that violence and aggression experienced by staff in those environments.
Yeah, thanks for that. I think it is a very worthy project that has investigated causes for challenging behaviour by people visiting health healthcare establishments. I think that that's very useful, but it does raise the question, I think, of the wider safety environment of all who are involved and who could also be victims. So thanks for that. Thanks for that information. John.
Yeah, comment rather than a question. I always thought this was worth a try, and we're having to innovate. Audit Scotland and others are telling us we can't keep doing the same stuff, otherwise we won't be sustainable. And this was an experiment. This was a trial, and it didn't maybe work as well as we'd hoped. But if you're going to innovate and try some new stuff, sometimes it's not always going to work. So I just think it was worth a try. So don't want to be critical about the fact that it didn't deliver everything that we hoped for. That was it.
Yeah.
Can I come back on that? Yeah, I think that's a really helpful perspective. I think we need to try lots and lots of things. I think the factors that made this less than successful it's not necessarily the idea or the principle of what's trying to be achieved. I think it's some of the other variables when this was sort of early days in post-COVID when everybody else was busy. There are information governance issues, there were management issues, sort of service provision and contract issues. So there was lots of factors that contributed or there are always lots of factors that contribute to whether something's a success or not. I think in this circumstance, with the factors involved, it didn't quite hit the mark. But I think in principle, absolutely, we need to be innovative around how we reduce demand and harm in the community. And it's just as the previous report, a bigger focus on prevention, early intervention has to be absolutely key to all of this work.
Thank you. Sandy, you wanted to come in?
Thank you, Chair. I see Hussein had his hand up before me, so I'm happy to let Hussein come in.
Hussein?
Yeah. Oh, thank you very much. That's not at all. John very much covered the point that I was going to raise, but I'll just perhaps reiterate it in a slightly different way, and that was, I think it's pleasing to see the honesty that comes out of the paper that we have before us. We tried something. It didn't have the results that we expected, but the fact that we can actually say that and acknowledge that we tried something with the best of intentions and it didn't work, and we perhaps didn't get where we wanted to go with that. But I think it is quite telling as well just how important mental health is. That was second highest on the list of issues that were presented at ARI. So that's, I think, a very positive steer that there's clearly a lot of work still to be done around mental health. I'd like to put on record my thanks to everyone that was involved in the project and to you, Simon, as well for the report. My actual question is really going down to, I guess, I think it's 4.12 in the report. How are we now embedding the learning from this into what we're doing? Clearly, some of the challenges are systemic. We talk about legal contracts. There's obviously the funding issue, and however that goes in the future in terms of other navigator projects to similarly trial things. But in terms of the learning that we are able to implement from this, could you maybe put some context around how we're taking that forward?
Simon?
Yeah, so there's a number of things across a number of work streams that we're looking at. So one of the important ones, I think, is the joint work that's happening between Very Well Practice and the Timber Market. And the Timber Market is our sort of front door drug service, where we've increased the provision of physical health checks for people. And we're seeing a lot of respiratory health, physical health, so underdiagnosed and undertreated comorbid health problems, which would be a significant driver for people attending hospital. We're also, we have an assertive outreach team. We have some data coming through that. So increasing the engagement with people who do end up in hospital and back in the community quite quickly. So how we wrap around those individuals, and looking to try and start a piece of work that would look at almost enhancing some of the level of care and support that people need. So there will be lots of people end up in emergency department because of non-fatal overdoses, but also in hospital for other health conditions where they maybe need a higher level of care and support in the community. So they might have, for example, an amputation or respiratory health. And then how do we wrap around? So they're trying to manage engagement in drug treatment and engage in mainstream healthcare support and possibly other sort of social care aspects. So that can be very complicated when somebody's highly vulnerable, traumatized, etc. So there is quite a lot of work around that, those sorts of pathways, and having almost a tiered approach to the vulnerability, and always keen to try and support colleagues in the emergency department because they do such a great job and support people. So there is a working group looking at collectively the acute sector setting and the community supports that could be aligned to supporting folk in those environments, that in a way that means that we're trying to take some of the pressure off emergency departments.
Grant, thank
Thank
you.
you very much.
Sandy.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I was just going to circle back to your question about the sort of wider staff safety, just to kind of make a couple of reflections there. I've certainly been involved in various NHS Grampian meetings where that topic of cameras on your body cams, if you like, is being discussed, and it's complex. I can think of people describing some of the challenges, such as, does that actually give staff a false assurance? Do they kind of feel safer just because I'm filming the bad guys when they do something? And does that actually help? Does it make people more complacent? Question. There's a lot of emphasis on de-escalation and trying to kind of manage through that. There's also a lot of emphasis in Grampian and our staff around zero tolerance. But again, that's quite challenging. What does it actually mean if you haven't got security staff, which we don't have in most of our premises? What does actually zero tolerance mean? And I think there's another one that rings a bell in my head around the possible challenges of data protection in that. So I'm a member of staff in Ward 19 or whatever, and I'm filming, and I'm now seeing you, John, coming in with his whatever and for his other appointment. What do we do with that data, and where do you put that data, and where do you store that data? So I guess what I'm trying to say, Chair, is there's a lot of discussion at a Grampian level about that, and there's no black and white quick answer, but it is regularly discussed, that topic about, I'm not even talking about the cost of them, but the complexities of trying to bring that in are challenging, because you'd have to take the assumption almost, well, we've got 15,000 staff in NHS Grampians, that means everybody gets a body camera, because how do you determine that I'm not going to be attacked compared to Fiona being attacked or whatever? So, but there's a lot of discussion around that, and I wouldn't want you to think people are not concerned and considering that, and in the broader sense, not just in Simon's area of services.
Great, that's really useful to know. I didn't know that there was that there were ongoing discussions about staff safety. I mean, it's regrettable that we're talking about it, but we do have to think about the safety of those who are vulnerable. I mean, I was also thinking of ambulance staff who are particularly at risk. I don't know if that, I mean, if there was ongoing discussion about their welfare, that might be worth focusing on, because I mean we hear of lengthy ambulance queues, so frontline ambulance staff are therefore exposed for longer periods to potentially volatile circumstances. But it's good to know that there is thought being given. And Simon, did you want to come back on this point, or is it something else?
No, I guess, I mean, not to detract from the severity of some of the experiences that staff have in terms of violence and aggression, but I guess an underpinning value that we can all have is about being trauma informed. That a lot of the people who, in a sense, behave badly, are people who are very emotional or distressed and traumatized, maybe find it harder to regulate their own emotions, and will have sort of primal concerns or fears about attending a hospital or appointments or clinics, etc. So there is that sort of bit about looking at our own processes and systems and how we support people in a trauma-informed way. And again, whether hospital settings are the best way to provide support for extremely vulnerable people. I mean, if there's more that we can do in the community and people's own environments, etc., then that's healthier and better as well. But it's not an excuse for some of the behaviour that people will experience, unfortunately.
Yeah. Thanks for that. Yeah, the Navigator project has been a useful experiment, and there are some really helpful learning points that have come out of that process. Is the committee content with the recommendations? Okay, the recommendations are agreed for 6.2. On to 6.3, which is the Accounts Commission paper.
Yeah. Hiya, good morning. I'll just do a brief introduction to this paper, if
please
that's
do.
okay. So the paper is providing an overview and the key messages from the recent Accounts Commission report, which was published by August Scotland in July. The recommendations are contained on page 76 of the pack, and there's a kind of brief assessment of our own IJB's performance against these recommendations. And I think it's important to note that this report is going to have further iterations, so there'll be annual updates. And they've committed to including recommendations within future reports that work across the public sector. So I think they're recognising that some of the recommendations here are not just within the power of the IJB to implement. So there'll be recommendations towards the boards and local authorities as well. I just open up for any questions or comments on the content of the report.
Okay, thank you very much for that. Yeah, it's really helpful. It's really helpful to have this information and to see the responses. I think it's been we're getting feedback from.
Oh, apologies. I'm in Marshall College, so I'm in the open plan office. Yeah.
I thought I was being heckled there. So it's really helpful to see the responses, and it's good to showcase really innovative projects like the Frailty Pathway and so forth. There's mention there of the carers strategy, and I'm not entirely clear where we are with that. I wondered if we might get some. Would it be possible to have some further brief information on how we are with developing the carer strategy, in particular with that focus on, well, with a focus on young people? Do we have more information on that?
I might invite my colleagues Alison or Stuart to speak to that. Stuart's popped his hand up.
Stuart.
Yes, thank you, Chair. The carers annual report will be published at the end of this year, but we can certainly work together with Sarah to look to include further information for this report moving forward to the committee in due course. No problems with that at all. But like I say, the full annual report is scheduled in for the end of this year.
Great, thank you very much. Any questions on 6.3? I don't think we've got any more questions. Yes, we do. John?
Yeah, again, not a question, but a comment. On page 83, it says we have a committed and driven workforce. So I think we can applaud them for that.
Yeah, definitely. Completely agree with that.
I also think all our political colleagues should be forced to read this report because it's really important. Not sure how that would go down.
Not sure how we could arrange that, but
no, we can try.
Good. It's a very, very helpful report, and yeah, it's really good to see the response information. I mean, I had the feeling that we could that we could have had much more content, because there could have been inclusion of the health determinants research, the investigation into the Marmot cities project and so forth, which would add more detail. But we've got suitable information there within the report. If there are no more questions, is the committee happy to agree the recommendations for that item? Good. 7.1, there is no exempt confidential business. That takes us to the date of the next meeting, which is the 3rd of December, and to the close of the meeting. So thank you everyone for your participation and contributions, and next meeting on the 3rd of December. Thank you.
Thanks very much.
Thanks.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, everyone.